beneficiary, so thank you, Sammy. So I am the executive director of Girls on the Run. How many of you have heard of Girls on the Run? Oh my goodness, I love this, amazing. How many of you have been involved with Girls on the Run oh my gosh, this is amazing. We have coaches, participants, oh my gosh, so cool. Volunteers at our 5K, love all of this. This is fantastic. So many of you already know about our program, but for those of you who don't, and maybe those of you who do know about our program, I want to clarify something. When I said I'm from Girls on the Run, who immediately thought that we were just a kind of a running program for girls? Anybody? Girls on the Run? No? Okay, cool, great. That's awesome. Well, good. Because we are so much more than a running program. While physical health is a core component of our program and our participants are working throughout the season to be able to complete a non-competitive 5K at the end of the season, we're really proud that Girls on the Run is also equipping our participants with the social emotional tools and skills that are going to help them thrive as teenagers, as young adults, and into adulthood. When you think back to those amazing middle school years, what immediately comes to mind? Thinking cliques, feelings of loneliness, anxiously wanting to fit in, feeling insecure and hating your body, wishing you were someone else, feeling of self-doubt, feeling insignificant. Any of these ring a bell, folks? See some nodding? Make you want to cringe a little bit because it brings you right back there in those awkward and confusing years? Yeah. So now you are here tonight. Maybe still with some of those same anxieties, but you're empowered to make an impact in a girl's life during a critical time when she begins to develop her self-identity and her sense of self. Girls on the Run is unleashing our participants' potential to be the best version of themselves through a curriculum that is helping them build healthy relationships with themselves, with their peers, and with their community. So as I mentioned, the participants finish the season by completing a 5K. We purposely do not time our 5Ks because we want it to be a celebration of an accomplishment versus competition. The participants are encouraged to create their own goal, set their own goal. Maybe it is to win the race, or the 5K. We don't even call it a race, we call it a 5K. Maybe it's to win. Maybe it's to beat a certain time of theirs. Maybe it's to walk a minute, run a minute. Maybe it's just simply to finish. So then when they cross that finish line, they can experience firsthand what it's like to achieve a goal that maybe at one point they thought was unattainable. At Girls on the Run, we want our participants to learn at a young age that with hard work and belief in yourself, you can do hard things. I think we all could stand to remind ourselves of that from time to time. Otherwise, we might not sign up or apply for that new job, or maybe sign up for our first 5K or marathon, or join a new club like Light Horse Track Club. Instead, we begin to doubt ourselves and our abilities and shy away from trying new things where we can learn and grow. So while you may not have had the opportunity to participate in Girls on the Run, your generosity today is ensuring that our current and future generations of young girls will have the opportunity to be part of a community that encourages them to unleash their limitless potential, similar to what I imagine many of you feel happens to you at Light Horse Track Club. So while financial contributions ensure that all eligible participants, regardless of their ability to pay, have the opportunity to participate in our program, we're also looking for coaches. It sounds like some of you have already been a coach, which is fantastic. We're also looking for volunteers at our 5K. As a volunteer coach, you'll have the opportunity to share your passion for community and for running and be a role model for the next generation of leaders. So we put a card on your table with more information of how to get in touch with us and get involved. You can scan the QR code, you can email us, you can call us. And I want to just thank you again for your generosity tonight and for choosing us to be the beneficiary. We are so honored. Thank you.
Check. Okay, here we go. All right. Hey, we got a check for you. All right, we are so honored to have you on as a beneficiary for this year. You guys do incredible work in the community, and we are beyond thrilled to be able to present you a check
We're going to get something.
All right, thank you guys. All right, right now we've got a quick, a lot of you have been fundraising for the past few months. I mean, this is a big part of it, right? Like building our community, growing our community. Amazing to be able to donate that amount of money to such a powerful organization as Girls on the Run. And it's just the first installment, hopefully. So hopefully our track meet will be able to do a second installment and continue to grow our community, grow our outreach. All right, next up, we've got our panel discussion. We have an awesome discussion on tap for you today. We've moderated by our own Natalie Daniels.
Okay, well, gosh, I'm gonna have to tell my age because I've been around for so long. Okay, so back when I was a kid, I wanted to be an Olympic athlete. I was a loner anyway, and I just spent time on my own by myself. It's before athletics, but I spotted the Olympic Games on TV. So my first goal was to be an Olympic gymnast, and that's where I would just roll around in my living room carpet and do flips and things like that. But I also spotted the track and field. So little by little, I decided the track was better than gymnastics by the time I got to high school, and that's kind of how I started. I became a runner, but I wanted to be a sprinter, and I was pretty quick, pretty fast, but I was small, and I had some success at the sprints, but I could never win them. I was always second or third, and I had a teammate that always finished ahead of me, which wasn't going to work, and I wasn't going to make an Olympic team that way. So eventually my coach moved me up in events, and one day he decided to throw me in the 800 meters, and I won the race, and that's where I stayed. So my beginning of running was basically from wanting to be an Olympic athlete and then finding out I had talent, but little by little. So as you know, as I know now, my later years, it wasn't only just the 800, but I started to experiment with different other events in running, but that's how I started.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it was different from what you expected. Like you went into it expecting, to be great at a certain distance, and you just kind of had to change and adapt.
Absolutely. It was definitely hard. The thing I know about running is not easy on the body, and that's a basic kind of a challenge.
So I hated running in high school. Whenever it was time to do the mile, like the whole week leading up to the mile, I was like dreading it. And then I didn't run at all in high school or in college, but then I graduated college and I was kind of looking for something to do because I was very involved in a lot of activities while at college, including dance. So I started off by just joining a gym. I thought this would give me an activity, it would keep me in shape, and specifically step aerobics because that was very similar. I'm dating myself now. The step aerobics were offered twice a week, but I wanted to get the most value out of my gym membership, being like a poor recent college grad. So I got on the treadmill because it was the only piece of cardio equipment that I thought was like approachable. All the other big scary machines scared me. So I started just running on the treadmill a few days a week for fitness, and it was really cool to see. Now I can run 1 mile without stopping, now 2 miles, now 3, now maybe today I'm going to go a little faster. And I did that for a long time. I didn't even really know what a 5K was. I didn't really have awareness of this outdoor world of running. I didn't want to go outside because I had my disc man. Once again, dating myself. And I would send the disc man on the treadmill, so that was really important to me. But then one day, I was at my 5-year college reunion, so it's been 5 years, and there was a 2-mile race. And so instead of doing my normal gym treadmill, I was like, maybe I'll do this 2-mile race. And so I did, and I finished it. And then at the end, they handed me this it was UVA. They handed me this UVA Jefferson mug, and they said, well, you have won. I'm like, what? Really? Because I was just sort of jogging and talking to this other guy and running it with him. And I was like, well, that's cool. And then the guy I was running with said, well, hey, there's a 10K in Washington, D.C. next weekend. It says Lawyers Have Hearts 10K. He's like, do you want to do it? And I'm like, well, what's a 10K? He said, it's 6.2 miles. And I'm like, yeah, I think I could do that on the treadmill, so sure. And I did that, and I really liked it, and I placed relatively well for not ever having really run outside before. So from there, I just decided I'm going to do this outdoor racing thing. It's pretty cool, and then now I've run 35 marathons.
And that is such an interesting thing, and we'll get into this a little bit on this panel, but the use of different technologies, different things to get people into running, where there are these barriers that kind of exist, where it's a little bit scary to sign up for a race, to show up at the starting line, to be like a high school runner, or especially for women, there's a lot of imposter syndrome that comes with that. Like you line up and there's this immediate thought of like, wow, should I set myself farther back or should I move farther forward? And that's awesome. That's really interesting. Cool. So we did kind of talk about very briefly just sort of the way that women's running has changed, and both of you have been running for decades at this point. And Alisa, so a question that came up for you specifically was you came up during a difficult time in our country's history, a contentious time as a female athlete of color in the South. Can you speak a little bit to some of the barriers you've experienced, how you feel the climate in competitive running is for female athletes of color today, any opportunities that exist that didn't exist before?
Yeah, I kind of had different times of change. Initially in high school, I was one of only 3 girls on the cross country team. We didn't have girls in cross country at my day. We started our first female girls cross country in high school. But once we got that going, it's just amazing how quickly it started. Then everybody wanted, it was just one team, and then boom, it was a huge success. So the next year we had a team. When it came to running in general, I remember my first road race was in Washington, D.C. at Haynes Point, and I went out, because I had just gotten into the love of distance at that point, and I joined this 10K, and I remember I was wearing this stretchy blue catsuit over top of a cotton t-shirt, crazy thing. And I looked up and I was like the only woman in the race, let alone African-American woman, that's another story. But then the gun goes off and I run it. I finish in somewhere, I win the thing, of course, because no one was out there hardly, but I ran a decent time, but it was just like, wow, where are the women back in that day? That's 1983, for instance. So for me, I think the odd thing is that being an African American woman has always been an issue when I stand on starting lines. I don't see a lot of African American women on the line. I think we still believe that African American women believe that it's the sprint events that they're going to stick with. I know I was the same way. I wanted to be a sprinter. So it was harder to it's still hard to get that change of mindset in my own African American community. Going into perhaps, like you were mentioning about the different times in life, ironically, it wasn't the South that I had the biggest issue with racing. I remember in California years ago, in the early 90s, I was in a road race in somewhere near Orange County, and I saw it on Runner's World, and it listed the top male, top female winners got $250. So there I was, had driven down from Upland, we're stepping like near Pomona in Southern California, drove down the coast to run this race, and I ran the race, and the top local woman was there, we were battling back and forth, and finally I came across the line, and at the awards ceremony, this big old hubbub for about a half an hour. I was like, well, what's going on? So I finally went to me and said that, well, you weren't the first local. And so I sat like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get this prize money. But after a while, I think the woman was like, are you kidding me, guys? So they did give me the award, but I think it was simply a matter of, well, we don't really want to give her this money. And that happened to be an issue early on again in the 80s, 90s. They had issues with a lot of the African runners coming in to run races and taking a lot of the money. So that was kind of a sticky situation. But no, I'm glad to see that things have changed. I just wish I'd get more of my African American women to run. And Rafaela, I'm so happy to see you out here because when I first met that beautiful young woman, she was a little baby girl. And I was coaching her with the kids' track club in Gainesville. So it's just lovely to see events and groups like this is what's going to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I have coached middle school and high school before, and it's so interesting how you see kids sort themselves based on what they think they're capable of. And one of the things that I did not fully appreciate about you before tonight was that you have qualified for the Olympic trials in the 800, 15, and the marathon, correct? And if you ask me to run an 800, I will get laughed. So, but like I can run a marathon all day, and so it's very interesting to see how people see themselves as being capable of something. And so it's, I think, really important to what you said. It's like, I think, more women, in particular women of color, should see themselves as, you're capable of so much. And we have Raphael, who's amazing, obviously. So we have, it's something that needs to have more attention and appreciation. So thank you so much. So the next thing, so we briefly touched on this in regards to, different forms of technology. Elizabeth, you mentioned starting running on the treadmill, which is awesome. It leads into my next question for you, especially like you have built this incredible community on social media, using technology to build communication with people all over the world, but specifically women, myself in particular. What inspired you to share your story, and for both, what different types of technologies, or how do you think different technology, social media being one, but also things like wearable trackers, different apps. I use an iFit, and iFit for me is a great training tool, something that gets me to run fast when I want to.
you know, the whoop that I can't take off even now, even though it doesn't match with my outfit. You know, how do these things help women, you know, both understand themselves better, whether it's the community, whether it's the wearable training apps, how do they, you know, understand themselves better and then set their sights higher, you know, set their goals higher, and you know, start.
Yeah, well, blogging was really important for me, actually, back in, let's say, 2005, 2006, and MySpace, actually. On MySpace was the first time somebody actually called me a runner, and I'm like, I'm not a runner, but then people kept calling me a runner. I'm like, well, I guess maybe I am, it's just not how I saw myself. And so I started blogging on MySpace about my running, and then I moved that over to just a regular blog. And then I've been writing about my running for so long, and I had been on this journey to qualify for Boston, and I had all of these sort of mental obstacles that I had to overcome to get there. And I decided to write a book. I'd always wanted to write a book, and so I wrote it and I published it, and I decided I was going to get on Instagram to just promote the book, and it would probably be, you know, on Instagram I'm promoting the book, get some sales, and then that would be the end of it. But what I did not expect at all when I got on Instagram back in 2016 was that I was going to be a part of a community of runners, and I was going to actually be part of building that community. Not at all what I expected. But I enjoyed sharing. Back then it was just mostly like sharing my daily runs, but then it kind of evolved into sharing my running philosophy and my ideas and things like that.
Technology for me has been a huge thing because I have had the benefit of kind of living long enough, running long enough to see the big change. Back in 1999 when I was running the Brisbane Marathon, I literally had splits written on my arm so that I could see, which didn't work, but it kind of worked early on, how I was progressing. But to think if I had just had a garden, how much better it would have been. And then the advent of shoes, these fabulous, like really cushiony shoes, and then the carbon plates, oh my gosh. So with me, I can actually feel the difference because I used to be able to run, you know, wicked fast. And so I could take, when they first came out, maybe about 5 years ago, I took them out to a track and actually sprinted. It was like, oh my, I could feel the difference. Back in my day, we didn't have that type of propulsion on your foot, and so you could actually, I could feel it. So I've not only seen and experienced the change of technology, but I've got to appreciate it and kind of wish I had it then, kind of thing.
Absolutely, and that's one thing, you know, so both of you are masters runners, which is an incredible thing. You know, definitely a lot of longevity in sport. Both of you have been running for multiple decades at this point, and, you know, are doing it competitively, and both of you are way faster than I was when I was in high school, so, you know, it's incredible. So, kind of on that note, longevity in the sport is something that, you know, I personally aspire to. I think a lot of people aspire to. What advice would you give to women who want to have long and competitive racing careers, especially as it relates to things like choosing a job, choosing a place to live, growing a family, those sorts of things?
I would say two things. The first is really listening to your body and paying attention to what your body is saying, and if there's something on the training plan, but yet you have something going on with your foot or your hamstring, pay attention to that because that is really important with longevity, is just avoiding injuries. And then the second thing is like avoiding mental burnout. And this almost happened to me until I was able to turn it around. Don't get too focused on the PRs, the time on the clock. Don't get too like obsessive about your weekly mileage or what the training log is. Do it for the love of it, do it for the joy of it, because if you truly find joy in the sport, you will do it for a very long time. If you're just doing it to get a certain goal time, it's much easier to get burnt out.
Sunscreen, or pancake makeup. Back in the 80s, we used to lather it on, and it was like a thing when you go out for track in college. We just like, wait a minute, we put our makeup on and then go to the track. So anyway, back in those days, I think that helped the whole sunscreen issue. But once I got older, I used sunscreen because you're out there many, many years. I've always taken vitamins. It's just one of those things where I've always eaten well, but there's some kind of doggone mineral I'm missing, and my doctor notifies me, and I should have taken a vitamin. I've always taken vitamins throughout the many decades. And I've always rested 1 day at least per week. I just do not have the body that can go 7 days. Never have, of course never will. And sleep. You must sleep well or we'll all fall apart. One more thing, you got to eat right. Eating is like, I've seen it happen unfortunately with my roommates or college teammates. And I have so many people in my history that have just like, whatever happened to this one? Whatever happened to that? And it's typically due to their eating behavior. And I am one who has eaten a bag of Fritos and a sliced chocolate cake all through my career, but you simply can never go to the starvation mode. I've had that happen too. But my longevity is probably because of those few different things.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. So going back to a little bit of the wearable technology, my husband's gonna laugh at me when I tell the story. Do y'all know what a Utah soda is? Yes. Okay, I'm obsessed with Utah sodas right now, but when I drink as many Utah sodas as I want, this whoop goes off the next day. And it's like, girl, you need to stop. I mean, my recovery scores are very low. And it's very interesting how I can tell. A Utah soda is coffee creamer and like diet soda. So I'll drink like 6 of them.
See, I didn't drink coffee until my 40s. So I just had no tolerance for it. So now I do drink some coffee, but yeah, I agree. Coffee made me.
They're very delicious, but they are definitely not helping my sleep. And I think that's really important. So one thing both of you kind of touched on is this idea of, burnout, and I think that's something that I've been. My story is that I've kind of walked onto my D3 team. I was not very good. I graduated college. I kind of developed this lifelong love for it, as Elizabeth mentioned, and now I'm more competitive than I've ever been. But I've competed on a lot of different teams, and some of them have been more competitive versus others, to where I've been burned out. I haven't really loved it. I've been just competing in order to stay on the team, etc. So one thing I have noticed in the last kind of 10 to 15 years is that there's been this explosion of new running businesses and post-collegiate groups, and the inclusion of things like sub-elite and development programs for races, both large and small. There's been a corresponding an increase in the number of women going after faster times. So things like Olympic trials qualifiers, especially the marathon. Do you see other opportunities or challenges, whether through social media promotion or higher caliber races that are targeted exclusively for women, to the continuance of this trend? So for one, I saw for the 2020 Olympic trials, a lot of women going after that sub 245 standard. And a lot of them would just end up burned out, they would end up injured, they would, get close to the standard, but it would be at the expense of everything else in their life. So, can you both kind of speak to this idea of, being competitive without sacrificing, your entire life?
I can start with that. That's a lot of what I talked about in my book, because my mental health was not all that great while I was really trying to qualify for Boston. It was sort of this vicious cycle. I would go into a race and I would put all of this pressure on myself to qualify, and the stakes were really, really high, and that would give me tremendous amounts of anxiety. So even though I was in amazing shape physically, I have performance anxiety, and I would just run this marathon time that wasn't even close to corresponding with like my equivalent 5K or half. And so then I'd go to the next one and I'd have that memory of that horrible race in my head, and then it would raise the stakes even higher. So you just have this cycle of bonk, upon bonk, for lack of a better word. And so I think really what turned things around for me is lowering the stakes a little bit, realizing that running is just one aspect of your life, looking at yourself as a whole person, understanding what your values are, why do you value yourself, gaining confidence, and looking, once again, holistically at your whole life, and putting running in the area that it belongs.
For me, I did the back and forth with track and roads. That's what kept it from being monotonous. I was on literally the track for a few months, maybe during the summer. And then in the fall, I was all road, and then back on the track in the winter. So that kept it fresh, kept different goals. My body was doing different things, and one helped the other. I remember my marathon in Richmond, my 1999 Richmond Marathon that qualified for the trials. I had finished doing some kick butt 10 milers, and that's what got me to that line, ready to go. I had no idea what I was doing, but, which was the beauty of it all, is that I had no idea what I was doing. I was in it just kind of fresh and enjoying being at a big race.
Yeah, suspending that pressure I feel like is a huge thing, like at least for me. I know I think there's a lot of people in this room who are very type A when it comes to running, so it's like you put a lot of effort into hitting these goals. And you know, that was my marathon PR. I was 4 weeks pregnant. I found out I was pregnant the day before, and it took all of the pressure off. And it was kind of to me, it was like a good reminder of that, of like, there's so much more in your life that's meaningful, and this is a meaningful part, but you can kind of suspend that stress that you put on yourself. You don't have to run, you know, you're gonna do the best that you can on this day, but it's gonna be special for a lot of ways.
Reminds me, I wanted to mention also is that when you mentioned about those post-collegiates and then you're trying to get that big goal. When I came out of Tennessee, we had a girl on our team that was a walk-on, and she ran cross country and distance races with us. Well, that same year I went to the trials for the marathon, I looked over and there she was. She had qualified for the Olympic trials. So whatever process, just because you're that walk-on does not mean that you're not going to be able to hit that goal of being Olympic.
Yeah, and having those opportunities, you know, after college, I think takes a lot of the pressure off too. So I went to D3 school. I didn't have, you know, scholarship money or anything on the line, but there was a lot of pressure to be, you know, extraordinary. And I didn't really find that I hit my kind of strong with running, a little bit, but like until I was a few years removed from that, where I was really finding the joy in it for its own sake, the joy of competing for its own sake. So that's amazing. And you know, so for younger women and girls at the start of their racing careers, or kind of like we mentioned, like just coming out of college, who are looking, you know, want to be that girl on the starting line who was a walk-on. What advice would you have for them when it comes to training and goal setting and competing?
I would say definitely trust the process. Results do not come overnight. Be patient. Know that you have a long future in the sport. You're just getting started. Do not try to do everything all at once. Take it slow, be patient, and results will come.
Get used to maybe not having what you want as far as material goods, because running can be costly, and you don't have a lot of fun sometimes, but it's the greater goal is what you're out for. For a while, when I hit hard times early in the 90s, I had 2 jobs I worked, and still managed to jump into road races on the weekend and make it work. So you can become creative, but again, you must always sleep, and you have to eat, and take a couple vitamins.
A few less Utah sodas. So if we have some time, do we have any questions from the audience?
You touched on it, I was wondering if you could speak more on the influence in your community of you specifically mentioned you were hoping to involve more women of color in distance running. You touched on it lightly about the African sort of takeover in the sport. In your experience, do American women see themselves when they see those women's success, or not? Or what do you think? Who would they see themselves? And do you think that next champion is, you know, down the road, a little 6-year-old girl that if she is inspired by the right person would dominate?
Yes. The most wonderful stories I got was when one day I was at a track and some father came up to me and said his daughter did a little article on me. She's African American, and she got a little A on it. Everything is because she was inspired by me. So yes, the role model would be right here, and I have been, I believe, to many African African American women, but I think it comes down to the everyday. And like I was mentioning, it's not so easy to go out, to get up on Saturday morning and go down to get a road race. You have to have an entry fee to pay, you have to get there, you have to stay overnight. There's an expense involved in doing that. So I think it's the economic status also involved in that group, the African American woman, that becomes the block. That's why track and field, which is a good start base, is where you see a lot of African American women. And no, the African American woman does not see herself in the Kenyan and the Ethiopian. I have a funny story on that one. When I used to run the roads, there's a lot of Kenyans, Africans, Kenyans would run together in groups, Ethiopians, and often, as I ran up on them, one of the things they would do so they would win the race is to spit over at me, like spit. so I was like, are you kidding me? So it was very competitive, because they were there to make money too, is why they were there in groups. But, so yes, there is this symbiotic kind of issue, thing going on with the African Americans and African women. They don't see themselves at all because it's a different culture. Totally.
I just thought of a follow-on. I'm of the opinion that distance running is, it doesn't seem like it on the surface, but it's actually kind of a sport of privilege. Because you have to have a safe place to run. And again, compared to some other sports, is it as expensive? No, but there are key elements of technology. You touched on. Do you think that's a limiting factor for many young women?
Very good point. You're absolutely right. It's the safe green spaces. It's the footwear at 150 a pop. And it is certainly the time that's involved. And nutrition. Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on how that is overcome?
Yeah. Track clubs with donations. The NCAA has been, has gotten me and gotten a couple others up and out and is doing better. Wasn't there just a woman, Erica Kemp, who just had a nice performance at the Houston Marathon? African American woman ran 2:22.
Yeah, fastest American-born African American woman.
Probably maybe born affluent or so, but that is the issue. It is the ability to have the money to do the sport that is so fun and wonderful and easy and can keep you healthy and all.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anyone? Other questions?
Thank you for coming here and speaking. So coming from like a more competitive running environment, like into adulthood and like getting older and stuff, like I know that there's gonna come a time and point where I'm probably not able to run the way I used to. So I was just wondering if you guys have any tips on like what to deal with that, or like a way to think about that.
I would say don't think of it as an absolute time. I would think being your best self at where you are. So you could, if you really are motivated by PRs, you could say, I'm setting a PR in my 40s, or I'm setting a PR in my 50s, setting a PR in warm weather. I like to call personal records are personal, which means you get to decide what they are and how you're going to qualify them. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, funny thing, my mother thought when I was 30 it was time to hold it, hang my spikes. So it's truly a matter of how you feel. When I remember once I was in a meet and I was in my 40s and a young woman came up and said, Miss Harvey, I'm so excited to be in the race with you, but yes. So you don't go by what the calendar says, you go by how you feel, and as long as you are taking care of yourself, like I mentioned before, you're not going to feel a sudden change unless somehow in your genetics you're just going to all of a sudden turn gray at 25 or something. But no, I've had, fortunately, with my genes and my healthy living, I've just kept it going. And yes, there's times I'm like, why am I here, Alisa? You're a little old for this. But, why not?
No, and why not is, I think, a good question. And one thing we didn't quite get to was, the idea that, you're both masters runners, and masters running has never been so for money, for places, for awards. Like that's a pretty incredible thing. It's something that I am looking forward to. And one thing, Elizabeth, that you said, so when I coached middle school, I had a lot of kids who would say, you know, Coach Natalie, I really want to get a PR today. And it would be like pouring down rain. And these kids run on an asphalt track in like Walmart basketball shoes. And I'm like, hey, look, today we're going to go for a PR for today. We're going to go for your personal best today. All I want to see is that you are putting all of yourself into this race. And I think there's something to that, where it's like, you know, you're looking at different races and stages in your life in different ways. And so you're not always going to be the fastest you've ever been, but how can you be excited and motivated by where you are right now?
And I have been lucky that I have been in races where people are 20 years older than me, and I am like looking at them, the backside of them. So you really, it'd be against your benefit to think that I need to stop at a certain age. You just keep it moving until someone says, okay, maybe you should stop.
Yeah. So you can't walk, whatever. Crawl. Alright, do you have any other questions?
Thank you so much again for being here. It's such an honor, honestly, listening to this panel. I've gained so much advice from this. My question is, I have a half marathon coming up that I've ran a half marathon before, but it's for fun. But this one, I'm trying to actually run fast. And my goal is to try to run a marathon, where I already said full send I'm gonna do it, and there's no backing out, but I'm still kind of scared. I'm not gonna lie, I'm very terrified. So my advice is for anyone that is just starting out to do a marathon but wants to be a little competitive, how do you get over the barrier of being scared? And I know it's kind of easier said than done. You can be you just gotta do it, but really I would love to know, when you're in the, say you're in mile 6 or just the halfway point, what keeps you going when your body's I hate this and I want to quit right now?
That's such an excellent question, and I was actually having this conversation with somebody the other day. I think that is a skill. That is what makes a runner a strong runner, is that skill. It's not just about the training, it's not just about the physical. You've got to prepare for that mentally. You know going in that this moment is going to happen. At some point in the race, it is going to get uncomfortable and your body will want to stop. So a strong runner, a mentally strong runner, will know how to respond to that. And it is going to be different for each runner. For me, what works is that you didn't come this far and work this hard to just let it all go now. So fight for it, and it will feel like a fight, and you will have to repeat that ongoing, because if you'll say it to yourself, and then 3 seconds later you'll want to stop again. So having good mantras, knowing going in, what are you going to say to yourself at that moment, and even another level up is. Not just, okay, just hang in there, you can hang on. Can I give more? At this point, am I able to actually, I know this hurts, I know this is hard, can I actually even just give more even though I feel like I can't? Ask yourself that question.
And I would say, what worked for me is know your splits. Because in a marathon, if you get off those splits, you may have to stop walking off that course. So for me, I know in 99 I had 6:30 was written on my arm, and I got down to mile 8 or 9, and there's these 2 guys that were running. I ran by, and they started talking to me, and I was like, I don't believe these guys are trying to talk to me as I'm trying to. So I had to pick up the pace, which proved almost fatal. And so I got beyond, by 16 miles, someone said, hey, you're second woman. And I'm like, feeling good. This was good. And so by the time I got to mile 20, then 22 maybe, then it came back. I was on a wicked pace, probably 240 pace at that point. But I barely made it to the finish line. So you must stay on your splits, figure out what those splits are, to know why you're coaching and what you've been training, how you've been training, stick there. And then if it's too easy and you got 5 miles to go, then you can look it up, make it a little quicker.
I had almost the exact same experience, now that you're saying this, in the Richmond Marathon, where everyone was like, oh, you're a second woman. I was like, all right, let's go. And I'm in this great group of guys, and we're running way too fast. I get over that bridge, and I start to see spots in my vision, and I'm like, oh, I'm fine. And then I get to mile 20, and I'm puking on the side of the road, and the mantra that went through my mind in that moment was, you paid for this, so you have to finish it. And also your car is at the finish line. So,
But can you give more? Can you give more?
yeah. Can I give more to this? Apparently, yes. Maybe a little too much. But yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any other questions?
So this question's more for you, Elizabeth. So you have like more than 100,000 followers on Instagram. When you're training or like competing, does that ever add like any like additional pressure to you? And if it does, how do you manage that?
No, none at all, actually. Which is actually remarkable because when I had no followers and like nobody read my blog, I was like super anxious about it. Because I'm, when I put out on social media, it's just my authentic journey. What it is what it is. I'm just gonna say, okay, this was a bad day, this was a good day, and my sort of overarching how I post is I'm just gonna be authentic and I'm just gonna post what actually happened because I think it's probably more beneficial for people to see how a real athlete, a real runner who has real problems and real struggles deals with it, and so it doesn't phase me that one bit.
Yeah, there's a tough balance there, and one thing that I love about Gala is our social media winner this evening, is that, that posting of a real experience is huge, and I think that's, really special for your followers too.
Yeah, I'll always think of something that's going to be, inspiring. How can I inspire? And that's good, and that makes me a stronger runner too. Is because I'm like, well, I want to put out a positive message, and even though this race was not one of my better races, how can I still put out a positive message? And that keeps me positive. There's always something positive about any experience, whether it's a learning experience, and it's, as I've said this many times on the stage, it's not just about getting that goal time.
It's so funny, I want to say was, we were mentioning together talking about Boston. We both ran Boston, and it was, anyone remembers this last year, it was like 80 degrees, and they had to call, like, the people who had heat issues, go to the hospital, and people weren't coming across the line. But both of us, as I found out, were like, okay, it's hot, and we're going to do this. And we made it through. And I hadn't had heat illness issues, so I just knew I was a goner. But I literally stopped at each little stop, and I drank because I just knew I wanted to finish the race. But people weren't stopping. They were not, they were like, oh, it's 80 degrees, who cares, what? So be smart at whatever weather you get. You must adjust to the weather, even though you're splits or whatever, but you might have to take it down a notch.
Excellent.
Oh yeah, that was the race I just mentioned, that I crossed the finish line with a temperature of 106. So yeah, I could have benefited from this conversation. So. Excellent. So my question is, I think we run a lot of different distances, coming from the track and the marathon. If you had to pick a single race right now that was your absolute, like, what do you think of when you think of running? Like, this was the all-time best race of my life. What was it? It could be an 800, that's fine.
Well, it was the 800. The 800 was my all-time favorite event. I had the most amazing experience back in 1991 at the Pan American Games. They were in Havana, Cuba, and I was running against the national hero. Her name was Ana Hero, and she was like the best in the world. And I happened to the event by chance because the U.S. 800-meter runner didn't show up. There's two of them. One of them didn't show up, and I was a 1500. I didn't even qualify in the 800. I ran the 15. So the coach happened to be my coach of the U.S. team, and he says, "Hey, Alisa, you want to do the 800?" I'm like, heck yeah! So they were making the meet kind of situated for her because she was the great Ana Hero. and she was doing the 400 and the 800 and the 4x4. So they put all the 800 women in a final. We didn't have a trial, we just had a final. And we were standing 2 to a lane, which never happens in international competition. Anna got her own lane, but I did not get mine. Anyway, so the gun goes off, and a woman, I think from Brazil, elbowed me in the gut. So we took off, and I'm like, dang it. So they went so fast because Anna was extremely quick. She ran like a 154, 800. 49, 48, 400. So she takes off, I'm in dead last. So I'm hauling, but I'm conservatively hauling, around the track, and we get to the straightaway, and I can almost hear her bell that comes on, and I'm passing women, because they've gone out too quick, because they're chasing Anna. And I come through in like 58, 59 seconds, and little by little, they keep dropping past me, because they all gone too darn fast, chasing the world best. And the backstretch, a few more people, I look up and there's Anna, and I'm coming at her. So then I hear them yelling Anna from the stage and from the infield, because she doesn't realize I'm coming on her. And Fidel Castro's in the stands too, and the crowd is cheering, and the curve, I'm moving on her, and then she kind of looks back and puts in another care. And I won, she won, but I got 1 second behind her. I was second in that, so that's my favorite.
Wow. What a story. When you say 154, I'm like, oh, okay, 400. Any other questions? Last chance? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, both Alisa Harvey